Twice as Good with Hadley and Delaney is brought to you by Mila. Immer besser, forever better. Mila. And by Cuties. Cute you can eat. Cuties. And by Kitchen Works. Wherever we go, that's where the party's at. Kitchen Works.
As always, don't forget the first 4 rules of kids cooking. 1. Wash your hands. 2. Ask an adult for help, especially with hot items, sharp utensils, and appliances. 3. Don't be afraid to try new ingredients, especially if they are green. And 4. Have fun. These 4 rules make cooking twice as healthy and twice as good.
Hi, I'm Hadley.
And I'm Delaney.
And this is Twice as Good.
Today's show is going to be really sweet because Hadley and I have traveled to New Hampshire to learn about how maple syrup is made and sample some fantastic recipes that use maple syrup as a major ingredient.
That's really good.
We're here in Lineborough, New Hampshire, and we'll be meeting up with Mr. Chris from the Maple Guys. Chris knows just about everything you need to know about taking something from one of these maple trees and turning it into sweet maple syrup. But before we do, let's take a quick look at a little bit of maple syrup science and history. As you've probably guessed, maple syrup is made from the sap of maple trees. Sap is fluid that's transported through the tree that brings it water and essential nutrients. Both people and trees use a vascular system, which means they rely on veins to distribute essential nutrients. The sap found in North American trees in places like New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York, and Canada, where the climate gets very, very cold in the winter, is what we'll be looking at today. That change in seasons is crucial to maple syrup production. As the temperature drops, trees, including maple trees, start to store up a whole bunch of starch in their roots and trunks, kind of like how a bear stocks up on food before he hibernates to keep his body nourished as he sleeps through the winter. In the spring, the starch gets converted to the sugar that provides the trees with energy. As the seasons get warmer, it starts to flow upward from the roots and trunk towards the branches. That's just a little bit of the science that explains how the sugar gets into the tree. But the history of how it got out of the tree and onto your table is pretty fascinating, too.
Native Americans were definitely the first to harvest the sap of the maple tree and figure out how to transform it into something edible and incredible.
There's a legend that credits an Iroquois chief called Waxus and his wife for the discovery. The story goes that Waxus threw a tomahawk while hunting and hit a tree. He pulled it out and went on his way, leaving a gash in the tree behind. The next day, when the weather got warm, sap started to ooze out of the gash. Now there just happened to be a water vessel leaning on the tree and the sap flowed into it. That night, Miss Waxus found the vessel was full, and rather than making a trip to the stream, she decided to use what she'd found for cooking water. But when she boiled the sap, much of the liquid evaporated, and what was left behind was the first maple syrup. That story may or may not be true, but the Native Americans were the first to produce maple syrup, and the settlers who came here were quick to take up the process, but a lot has changed since then. trees, the trees that maple syrup comes from. We get a lot of our favorite foods from trees. Fruits like cherries, apples, and oranges. And nuts like almonds, pecans, chestnuts, and walnuts. But mostly when we think of the food we get from trees, it grows on the outside of the tree, up in the branches. But since maple syrup comes from something inside the tree, we need to find out how it gets from the tree to the table. We're going to be talking with Mr. Chris of the Maple Guys, who's going to tell us all about modern production of maple syrup.
Are these all maple trees?
Most of them here on this property are maple trees. There's some pine trees. There's a little bit of oak trees.
Are those pine trees?
Yep, that's a pine tree. The pine trees don't produce sap that we can use. It wouldn't taste that good.
Do you produce it during the right weather and then make it during the rest of the year?
Yeah, we only have 4 to 6 weeks to make maple syrup when the sap starts running late February. So if it's cold at night and then warm during the day like today, it's perfect sap weather. This right here is a sugar maple. It's a hard maple tree.
So it's extra sweet?
Extra sweet. Extra sweet sap in a sugar maple.
Are all of them sugar maples or just?
Not here. We do have some red maples that we do tap. The sugar content is about half. This is a traditional bucket how most farmers have done tapping for years. We take our drill.
Wow, that's amazing.
We go about 1.5 inches deep.
Does that hurt the tree?
Nope, it does not hurt the tree. It can still survive for years. All the trees on this property have been tapped since the early 1900s, as far as we know. So after we drill a hole, we just set the tap in. You can see the sap coming out, and we just push it in a little bit, and we give a little tap.
Oh, that's why it's called tapping the tree.
Yes. See, we'll set the bucket on here, and you'll be able to hear it hit the bucket. Hear that?
Yes, like a tiny
Yeah, so when I walk by in the morning, if I hear that, I know the sap is running. See, that's pure sap. You guys want to try that? It's just like a little sugar water.
It is like sugar water.
Yeah, it tastes good, doesn't it? Sometimes the sap, if it doesn't get cold and we have a nice day, that'll drip all night long.
When you take this part out, well, what do you do with the hole inside the tree?
The hole will heal on its own. It's like any wound that happens to a tree, like a branch breaks, it always will heal itself. It's a very small hole.
How warm does the temperature need to be to make sap run?
We need it to be cold at night, like 20 degrees, and then warm up during the day up to 40 degrees. And that will cause the sap in the roots to run up the tree to the top.
How long do these trees live?
Some of the trees on this property are over 200 years old.
Wow.
How old does a tree need to be before being tapped?
It has to be at least 30 to 40 years old. It depends on the diameter of the tree. We like to make sure it's at least 12 inches before we tap it.
How do you know how old they are?
We measure the diameter of the tree. If it's 12 inches, that's good enough for us to tap. You could tap maybe down to 8 inch, but it would be wounded and it would take a long time to heal.
What kind of maple trees produce the best sap to make syrup?
The best syrup is made with the sugar maple, and this is the sugar maple here. It's a hard maple, it's a hard wood, but we also can tap a red maple, which is a soft maple.
How important is the temperature outside to the length of the sugar season?
The season is normally 4 to 6 weeks. We start drilling holes like this in the end of February, and we hope we can go all the way into April, but that depends on the weather. We need cold nights and warm days. So we're just trying to make as much syrup and make sure we have it all processed in 4 to 6 weeks.
What do you do with all this maple syrup?
All the maple syrup we make, we store it in stainless drums, and then we break it down throughout the year for orders, and we sell to a bunch of local stores. You only can do 1 tap at 12 inches in diameter and 2 taps at 24 inches diameter. And here on this property, we don't tap anything more than 2 taps.
So you must spend a lot of time walking around the woods collecting buckets.
No, we don't do that anymore. We just set a couple buckets because I like hearing the sound of the sap dripping and I like to see them. But all in the property around here, we do tubing system. So we take real small taps like this that are under 1/4 inch for tree health, and we plug the tap into the tubing. Like so, we just push it right on, and then we drill the hole, and we take the hammer and tap it right into the tree like that. And then all the sap will come out of this into a big pipeline, and it'll all go to one spot to the sugar house. You girls want to check this bucket and see how full it is?
Sure.
Let's lift up the lid. Look at that.
It's completely full.
Yeah, and see how it's still dripping?
It is very sweet.
Very good,
What
huh?
kind of maple tree?
That is a sugar maple tree.
Where are we going?
Going right up here. I'm gonna show you where all the tubing and the taps are. Okay, here's how we do the tapping now. See the tap? We don't use buckets in this part of the woods. And you can see now it's a small tap, and look at the sap come down. Comes right down the tubing, goes right to the sugar
So
house.
it goes all around.
And here's an old tap hole from years ago, and that's how it looks on a big tree that's healed. We have 1,200 tap holes like this.
Oh,
We have about 14,000 feet of tubing out. And I'll show you where all the sap, them little lines go to. This is where all the little tubes go into the big tubes. And the sap will come in here, you can see it coming in here, and it'll head all the way down to the sugar house. And here, see the lines overhead? That's where the sap goes to the sugar house also.
Our next stop is the sugar house. Once the maple syrup gets harvested, this is the place it ends up for processing, the sugar house. Back when the settlers first started to harvest maple sap, they would empty the individual collection buckets into larger containers, then haul them to a sugar shack on sleighs or carts for processing. These carts were pulled by draft animals such as horses or oxen, but today there are much more efficient and easy ways to get the sap from the trees to the production facility.
What I did was I took a hydrometer reading and I checked for the density. See the red line?
Yes.
If the syrup floats at the red line, it means I'm right at maple syrup.
Okay.
Above it, it would be I'm over maple syrup, and I'd have to thin it out with some water or some sap. It's perfect. It's at 59 bricks. Then what I'll do, if I know it's perfect, I dump it right in here where I'm keeping all the syrup. And what I do is I look at my temperature up here, and once this gets up to 218.7, I'll have the valve open up and just continuously bring this maple syrup.
What is this doing?
This is a maple syrup evaporator, and I'll show you what it does.
It's giant.
We take raw sap and we go in the back of this pan, and there's 3 sections in this pan. And then it goes back here and comes all the way back down. And what happens is we started at 2% sugar, and then it gets thicker and thicker, more like maple syrup. This tells me the level in these pans. I like to keep it around 2 inches. And once it becomes maple syrup, it'll all come off here.
And then you sell it.
Yeah, this maple syrup evaporator will evaporate 120 gallons of sap an hour. What I do is I start a fire in here, and then I add firewood. I get the wood because I thin all around the maple trees, so I have all the other kind of species of wood that I burn.
Why is there so much steam and where is it all going?
It's going up to the top of the sugar house. It's all being boiled. Now the valve is starting to open as I'm at the perfect temperature for maple syrup. It's all moving by itself. It's all automatic. There's a little controller there looking at the temperature. And we've already figured out the right density based on the temperature.
How much is that?
That right there is probably about 6 gallons.
Wow.
And tonight, that'll be full, and this one too. This is our final step in making maple syrup. We went from the sap, we went through the evaporator, and we have the right maple syrup here, so what we want to do is bottle the syrup. What I do is I heat the syrup up to 192 degrees. And what that does, it makes it hot, so when I bring it into a jug, it pasteurizes everything. And if it's at 190 degrees, I just open up, you'll see it come out, and that's all stuff we made today. But it's nice and hot, you can see the steam leaving the jug. And right now that's pasteurizing. And once we fill this, I just move it off to the side, and I take the cap, You girls want to try filling one?
Okay.
Put the jug right in the center. Open it right up. There you go. Isn't that neat how that fills right up? See the steam leaving?
Wow.
And that 2% sap all the way to 59% sugar.
Does the bottled syrup have to age before it's ready to use?
You can use it right away. It can sit in that bottle up to 2 or 3 years. But as soon as you open it one time, you have to put it in the fridge.
Can you explain about grating maple syrup?
Okay, this is the sample we made today, and we want to find out what grade it is. So we take our grating kit and we set it in here. As I set it in here, you look, we have Golden Delicious, which is light, and an Amber Rich. So as we look at the colors, this one's light, and our syrup's a little darker, so it's not the Golden Delicate. So I'll move the Amber Rich over, and I'll move our Dark Robust over, which is a little darker. Now I look at this. I see Amber Rich, it looks pretty close, but then I look at the Dark Robust, and our sample's much lighter than the Dark Robust. So we go with the Amber Rich is what we made today. The most popular people see is probably this Dark Robust. That's the one you'll probably see most of in the supermarket. The Dark Robust is good for cooking. You put it on hams and you glaze it, it's really good.
Are there differences in the maple syrups that come from places like Canada and Vermont?
No, they're all different. The syrups are all the same from where they come from Canada, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Ohio, the Midwest, anywhere. It all tastes good. It doesn't really matter where you get it.
Mr. Chris will process our fresh maple syrup so that we can use it to make maple cream.
What we've done is we've taken maple syrup and we bring it up to a boiling point of 232 degrees, almost a solid. We remove more moisture out of it. Give it a taste. You want to try some?
It's very good. Is this the finished maple cream?
No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it into this machine. We're going to turn it on. We're going to whip it into a cream.
Let's do it.
And what we do is we just take it right in the machine. And after we heat it up, we let it cool for a while to get it this consistency. We don't want it hot. Okay, now that I've put all the thicker maple syrup in this funnel, I'm going to turn on the machine. Okay, now what it's going to do is going to take that maple syrup and bring it down through here through a pump and grind up the syrup, and it'll bring it all the way back up here. See how thick that is?
Yeah. Wow.
And what I'm doing is I'm going to mix it just like this. See, already it's changing color a little bit and getting a little thicker.
It's really white.
Yeah. And you see, I have to wait for it to change color. I want it to lose its gloss. So I have to stir it for a little bit. See it changing color?
It looks kind of like caramel.
Yes, it does. It's going to be smoother than caramel.
Is it ready?
Just about. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to open this valve.
Shouldn't we turn off this?
Nope, you have to keep it going because it's still pumping everything. Instead of going back to the top, it's coming down to the jug. We have a couple lids. You girls want to put a lid on?
Sure.
Each one of you can do that. And I'll keep filling. What we do is we start running out, we mix it down here to force it down into the machine. Girls like to try the maple cream we just made?
Sure. Could you also put it on like a bagel or something?
You can put it on everything. It's so sweet and smooth. Give it a try.
This is really good. Amazing. This is Miss Karen, and she's going to teach us how to make maple peanut brittle.
I'm glad to see you guys today. Maple peanut brittle just has a few ingredients. First off, we're going to add the butter and melt the butter in the pot. We're using 4 sticks of butter, which is 1 pound or 2 cups. So as soon as the butter melts, we're going to add the sugar and the maple syrup. We have to get it up to the candy temperature, so it usually takes about 20 minutes. This is another treat that you can make with maple syrup. Okay, it's almost ready. Okay, we can add the sugar now.
Perfect.
Okay, let me mix the sugar first, and then you can put the maple syrup
Do we
in,
want
okay?
the sugar to dissolve in the butter?
We do. It's going, because it's going to be cooking at such a high temperature, it's going to melt and it's going to be all smooth like candy. Okay, now it's time to add the maple syrup.
Is this the maple syrup that we've made here?
Yep.
There we go.
And then we're just going to stir it up.
Makes it thicker, certainly. It's like a darker color now.
What we're going to add right now, though, is the candy thermometer. And now we're just going to leave it here.
What temperature does it have to be?
It has to be up to about 300 degrees. So we just wait, and this thermometer will beep when it comes close to temperature. Now that the candy has reached the temperature, it's time to add the peanuts in.
Okay.
Would one of you like to throw the peanuts in?
Sure.
All of it in all at once. Don't touch the pot because it's hot. There you go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix them in.
That looks so good.
We're all mixed in. I'm going to quickly dump them into the cookie tray.
Is that really sticky?
Yes, and it's really hot. And you can see how fast it's turning into candy. You have to be really, really quick. And then you got to quickly spread it out. And now we're going to let it cool off and harden. So I'll move this out of the way. And here's some that I made earlier today. You can just see it comes off in one big piece.
Oh, wow.
And you can just break it into pieces.
That's really good. Here's a cool layer experiment you can do with the maple syrup at your house. We're going to make a density tube that allows us to check the density of different items. We already have maple syrup in here. And now we're going to add some dish soap. Pour very slowly. See how it's resting on top of the other one? Now we're going to add some vegetable oil. There we go, just the same as you poured the other one. Remember not to break the surface tension. Perfect. And this is some dyed rubbing alcohol. We dyed it red so it would stand out. Because then it would be the same color as the vegetable oil. So you want to make sure that you don't get this on anything because it would stain it. Perfect. Notice how each one kind of sits on top of the next. This is because they have different densities, which is basically thickness. Density is a comparison between an object's mass and volume. Density equals mass divided by volume. Lighter liquids like water or rubbing alcohol are less dense than heavy liquids like maple syrup. And so they float on top of the more dense layers.
We visited a blast tour in New Hampshire at the Maple Guys. We just love meeting Mr. Chris and learning all the fascinating facts that go into making maple syrup and trying out his fabulous recipes.
And we're very grateful to Miss Karen for sharing her super yummy maple peanut brittle recipe with us too. Thanks, Miss Karen. It's pretty amazing just how many places you can find food sources in nature that you might never have even thought about. That's why great chefs always keep their eyes and their minds open when they're on the hunt for new ingredients.
Because when you find a way to use something new and wonderful in your cooking, whether it's from around the world, around the corner, or even inside a tree, the awesome ideas and recipes you can come up with will be twice as good! information about the dishes prepared on today's show, including a listing of ingredients in the recipes, please visit us at twiceasgoodshow.com.
Twice as Good with Hadley and Delaney is brought to you by Mila. Immer besser, forever better. Mila. And by Cuties. Cute you can eat. Cuties. And by KitchenWorks. Wherever we go, that's where the party's at. KitchenWorks.